DonInLondon, hello. Readings from the AA Big Book, and I'll be covering Chapter 5 in just a moment. What is AA, Alcoholics Anonymous? Well, I share the AA Preamble before any of the readings, and the Preamble goes like this. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And in doing these videos, I was asked to share experience, strength and hope with those who may not have access to meetings or have no knowledge of what Alcoholics Anonymous is. AA is a place to go where we are able to find the truth of who we are, how to get sober one day at a time, and stay sober one day at a time. AA is full of unique, authentic people. I don't represent it, never can, never will, never want to. AA people share their experience, strength and hope where they will, and have that choice. So, from the Big Book of AA, Chapter 5. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have, and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. Some of these we bought. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil, until we let go absolutely. Remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. And this is not in the text, but for me it took me a long time to find out that it's my understanding of what a higher power can be in my life. So very easily and simply, in the end, I was able to say, truth, love, wisdom from others helps me on a daily basis. So, as Gandhi said, God is truth, God is love, and we get wisdom from other people. And that's where the fellowship works for me. AA as a fellowship became my higher power. And then I started to hear the truth from many in fellowship, and also learned that there was not always truth in fellowship. Love and wisdom. We find people with truth, love and wisdom on offer to help guide us as we go through the 12-step living process. Continuing, half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed, and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A. That we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B. That probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C. That God could and would if He were sought. And when it comes to A, B and C, this is just me off the text. That we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. Definitely I needed help. That probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, and the absolute truth is, if I couldn't stop as a single human power and broken down, the power of many with the wisdom of many, sharing experience, strength and hope, would suffice to start with. And that God could and would if He were sought, it comes down to your understanding of God, and it must not interfere with your religious or faith beliefs. They are absolutely, they work in tandem. But if you are not a member of a religious sect, or you don't have a particular faith in human wisdom, the collective wisdom of many humans, will suffice as well. So it's a broad church AA, and it's never excluding, it's always including. Carrying on, being convinced we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. So off the text, we have assets and liabilities. The assets of our personal characteristics, as described there: kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. And we also have the alternative, the liabilities, which could be meanness, egotistical, selfish and dishonest. But as with most humans, it says, he is more likely to have varied traits, and that was me, depending on my circumstances. Generosity from the very depth of my soul, and also meanness when things weren't quite right and I encountered despicable people. Despicable people bring out the worst defects in us, because we retaliate with the same measure very often, and fueled with drink and alcohol, is not a pretty sight. Continuing. What usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, and self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only he manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants, and do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not even in his best moments a producer of confusion rather than of harmony? Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation, the minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century, politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave, the outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity? Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. So for me, just coming off the text, in terms of God's help, it's actually asking people to help me, and actually having the humility to say, I don't know the answer which is going to suit us all, rather than trying to run the show as best I think it ought to be for everyone. This is the how and the why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter, in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, and we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new triumphant arch through which we passed to freedom. When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Being all-powerful, he provided what we needed, if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, we became conscious of his presence, and we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. We were now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker, as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me, and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties. That victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at least abandon ourselves utterly to him. In other words, we relinquish our narrow view of what should be, and start to open up to what could be in our lives, by inclusion of others in our way of determining what to do. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor, but it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. It's the relief of not having to know what to do. That was me, not the text. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which was a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted, though our decision was vital. It was a vital and crucial step. It could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, we started on a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically, which is why it is an emotional spiritual program, and physically as well. So emotional, spiritual, physical improvement and well-being. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations, which have been interfered with? We were usually as definite as this example. I'll just go through each one. I'm resentful at Mr. Brown. The cause? His attention to my wife. Told my wife of my mistress. Brown may get my job at the office. Affects my sex relations, self-esteem, fear. Sex relations, fear again, security, and self-esteem. Mrs. Jones. I'm resentful at Mrs. Jones. She is a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend. She's a gossip. And the effects, personal relationships and self-esteem and fear. I'm resentful at my employer. Unreasonable, overbearing, threatens to fire me for drinking and padding my expense account. The effects on my self-esteem and security. I'm resentful at my wife. Misunderstands and nags. Likes Brown. Wants house put in her name affects my pride, personal, sex relations, security and fear. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted much. Nothing but... I'll start again. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us, and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, the business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harbouring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again, and with us to drink is to die. It is plain that life which includes deep resentment, I'll cover that. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics these things are poison. And how much time, even in sobriety, can I find in resentment about a hurt I perceive? These days I would say to myself, even when people seem to be doing the worst toward me, it may be the best that they can be in that moment. It doesn't mean I'm right or wrong in how I react or respond. If I feel the hurt, I need to deal with it and understand that if I hold on to it, it's going to take me back into a mind-boggling route of I don't know what, just keeping going round and round on a resentment and losing sense of what the day has for me. We turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, and that's it. Is it real, or is it just that we think it's real? Had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered. But how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. This was our course. We realized that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick, or actually could be right. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, like ourselves, were sick too. We asked God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man, or this man might be quite right. How can I be helpful to him? God saved me from being angry. Thy will be done. And, sometimes where we say the words, we think that person we're spiritually sick, it just simply means we have deficits, and our spiritual conduct, which is living in the moment, has been compromised because we're angry. But also anger is a part of life and the spiritual part of living. So if we are responsible for our feelings, and we are the only ones who experience them, we may have impacted and made feelings in other people, but we feel the way we feel. And if we feel resentment, it will surely pull us into a horrible and difficult set of circumstances. So let it be as it is. Let it be that people can just be the way they are today. Their best they're doing, it may not suit us, and sometimes it will make us angry, but that is the best they are doing at that time. And it's not to judge if it's the best they can be, it's just the best they are right now. Continuing, we avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. And I also say to myself, would I treat another person like I've just been treated? And the answer may be no, but it's not for me to start dishing out the harsh treatment to another person. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. And as I say, we can love people and hate their behaviour. And I learned to love myself again and hated the behaviour of the years of drinking, where I was out of control and didn't know just how emotionally, spiritually and physically ill I was. Continuing, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's, and I think that's so crucial when doing any sort of inventory. What was our part in it, not what the other person's part was in it. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. And I know from a personal experience that fear, putting on a brave face and trying to keep people out with a very brittle ego, a defence mechanism to cover up what I didn't know, or guilt and shame, fear was always behind it, and it is a corrosive thread. So the answer is, by telling the truth, saying, I don't know. Simply the admission of I don't know, the fear evaporates. And if we are judged for not knowing, then we will get judged. But for every person who judges us, another person will say, I don't know either. Let's talk about it. Deep sigh. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Was it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem, or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so, but we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us, and humbly rely on Him. Does He enable us to match calamity with serenity? In other words, nature, universe, you consider what it is, the way the world works. We are all subject to the forces of what is going on the planet, so illustrated in recent times with earthquakes and floods. And similarly, if we just say to ourselves, let go of being right, so we can find an answer which is going to work in so many different situations, we find we have the ultimate freedom of choosing what we do next within the life experience we're having. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be, at once we commence to outgrow fear. Now about sex, many of us needed an overhauling there, but above all we try to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't of the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavour for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? We reviewed our own conduct over the years past, where we have been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate. Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our own future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mould our ideas and help us live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. In other words, it's down to you and what you understand in good conscience and in relation to the person you're with, no matter what. It's what two people decide is right for them, without hurting each other. Oh. If only society had actually made that clear at the very start. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. God alone can judge our sex situation, counsel our sex situation. I'm sorry, I missed a page. Counsel with persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realise that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. So we learn what is right for ourselves and those we are with by discussion and understanding. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and we will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our own experience. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analysed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people, or even that they were right. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct, and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book, In this book you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. And that's the end of chapter 5, how it works. And when I read that, the reason why I read it out partly is because it sinks into me even more, and it's a good reminder, because sometimes I haven't read these chapters for quite a while, and when I look back at how it works for me, let go and let God, understand the inventory process, the fearless moral inventory of assets and liabilities, my conduct over the years, all these things start to take perspective, and I start to see where I felt resentments against myself for not feeling good enough, resentments against others for trying to impose their will, and then resenting myself for agreeing to much of what they asked me to do. Indeed, I spent much of my time in jobs which I could do well, but weren't necessarily right for me. And when I retaliated because I knew better than the boss, of course the boss retaliated right back. If I had known myself, if I had not been ill, if I had not done this, that or the other, then it might have been different. But the good news is, it turned out the way it turned out. And great big learning was achieved. The truth will out eventually about what I did, what other people did, and my part in it. Doesn't make for very good reading in parts, I have to say, but driven mad by life will make it so, and drive us mad. And my way of dealing in the past was always to put a drink in between me and reality. So how does God work in my life? God is truth, love, wisdom of others, open to the universe, included, not running the whole show, nor even wanting to so much anymore. Of course, from time to time, my defects of character come out as big as they need in reaction to whatever is in front of me. If I can hold on and pause long enough to say to myself, what am I feeling? Why am I disturbed? What is going on here? And get into a meeting of AA where I can share about it, express my fear, because it's normally my fear, my reputation, my self-esteem, which is going to be knocked next. I start to calm down and look at it carefully and clearly, and often say to myself, in my whole lifetime, this particular event, how important is it to me? What is it teaching me? It's often teaching me that I need to change direction, my outlook, my attitudes and my behaviour. Thank God for that. So I end these videos always with the serenity prayer to God of good conscience, as you come to believe for yourself what works in your life, your higher power. Serenity, not always happy, but serene and peaceful in knowing this too shall pass. So to God of good conscience, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference is, for me, always just for today.